here since 8 o'clock this morning. How about I didn't go to work yesterday because I have no gas?
There's no need for panic or panic buying with the long lines we've seen on TV.
There was a little pandemonium at the pump during the oil crisis of the 1970s, but it didn't slake the planet's thirst for oil, growing steadily at about 2% per year.
Stop the line, you're going to have to go around the corner to the line cars at the next street.
And shut out of the Middle East by OPEC, the big Western oil companies simply turned up the heat elsewhere. Rigs began pumping oil from technically challenging areas such as the North Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and beneath the Alaskan permafrost. There were concerns, of course, about air pollution and oil spills. But the world was yet to start worrying about global warming and the end of oil.
Once the oil from those fields started coming online, we kind of forgot about all that other stuff, you know, because now the oil fell to cheaper than a bottle of water. By early 90s, we were still buying cars faster than we were actually making babies. So the car population was starting to overtake the human population. But it kept going on anyway, because there's a whole romance of the car, which had been built up through the 50s.
This was always going to be a love affair on borrowed time. Just as Hubbert predicted, the United States oil reserves had peaked in 1970.
It was that peak in 1970 that turned Hubbert into a folk hero. I came home and told my family, uh-oh, old Hubbert was right. We got no unused production capacity in the U.S. anymore.
Before he died, Hubbert predicted global oil production itself would peak in the year 2000. Plenty of industry insiders now think he was pretty close to getting it right. Colin Campbell is another retired oil industry geologist. After a career spent unlocking oil in the North Sea and the Americas, he started delving into the state of the world oil supply.
I think we need 3.
It was enough to drive him into his local for a badly needed stout or 3.
Well, now we face the other side of the coin, the second half of the age of oil, when this stuff declines. And with it, I suggest, more or less the world we know in a strange way.
My God.
Oh, excuse me.
Colin Campbell sees us living in a very glass half empty kind of world. And he's not alone.
Yeah, I was there at the beginning, yes, shortly after the discovery of oil in Arabia. And I'm seeing the end approaching. It's coming, undoubtedly. You yourself have seen it. The price of a gallon of gasoline has gone up 4 times. It'll go up 10 times.
Right from the beginning, the oil story has always been full of big numbers, but never more so than now. Imagine for a moment a gigantic building full of oil. It's enormous, a kilometre on each side. Now look up. It towers a staggering 4.5 kilometres into the air. It's a tank of oil that would dwarf any city in the world. This is the volume of oil we burned in a single year in 2004. 4.5 cubic kilometres of the stuff. Each year we guzzle another building like this, and each one climbs another 10 stories higher. Every day now, over 84 million barrels of oil are transported and burnt.
We go from 84 million barrels a day now to 110, 120 in 15 or 20 years' time. That's what everybody's assuming. All governments and all companies all markets, but a growing body of us ex-geologists and current geologists who work in and around the oil industry who study this problem think it can't be done, that in actual fact the peak of production is really close. I believe it's 2008, plus or minus 2 years.
It could have been as early as mid-November and as late as January 6, 2006. But my line is, it's past, it's gone. My career as a prophet is over. I'm now a historian looking back at the peak.
My numbers actually say last year, but it could be this year. And if you consider all categories of oil, including the tar sands and the deep water and so on, I think 210 would be a good estimate. But really, it isn't this peak has no great significance. It is the perception and the vision of the long decline that comes into sight on the other side of peak. That's really what matters.
We're dependent all of a sudden on rapidly shrinking supplies of ever more generally expensive oil. And that is the shock that's going to come to economies, and the shock that will force us to go to the alternatives as quickly as we can.
The most optimistic market and industry voices still see the peak far off in the future, if at all. They point to growth coming from new technologies, unconventional deposits such as the tar sands in Canada, and new discoveries. But there are few corners of the world left to look in. In the US, the steel legs of thousands of rigs have marched right across the Gulf of Mexico. They've moved so far offshore, they're now out of their depth. Semi-submersible rigs are drilling in over 2,000 metres of water.
This comes as a big surprise to people who don't know the issue. With all its resources and its money and its incredible kit, the year that the oil industry discovered the most oil in 1 year that it ever will was way back in 1965, and it's been kind of downhill ever since.
After supplying the world with oil for over 50 years, even the mighty Ghawar oil field is showing its age. It still pumps half of all Saudi Arabia's massive output, but its own reserves have dropped by 50%.
There's no question that the oil in the future is harder to extract than the oil that we have produced up to now. We've produced the best oil from the easiest reservoirs and the most convenient locations. We've produced over 1 trillion barrels of oil already. And at the end of the day, we have to ask, have we been producing it wisely or using it wisely in any case? And maybe we should be more efficient.
For the most part, oil is invisible to us. We barely see it, we rarely smell it. We have no real feeling for the enormous quantity of the stuff that fuels our existence. And we give little, if any, thought to the epic journey it's made from an ancient ocean to a tailpipe near you. Perhaps it was me. Perhaps it was you. But somebody, somewhere, has just released our carbon atom back into the atmosphere. And it could well have been the halfway atom, the one that marks the peak of production. Though that may prove to be the least of our problems. Now the